As my heir, William now assumes the Scottish titles which have meant so much to me. He succeeds me as Duke of Cornwall and takes on the responsibilities for the Duchy of Cornwall.
The palace doors burst open, and what happened next left the entire world in absolute shock. William and Catherine emerged, but this was no ordinary appearance. Royal guards froze. Camilla's expression said everything.
I know she will bring to the demands of her new role the steadfast devotion to duty on which I have come to rely so much.
Then King Charles did the unthinkable right there in Westminster Abbey, and cameras captured every jaw-dropping second. What they did next broke every royal rule and changed the monarchy forever. The footage went viral instantly. Palace insiders are calling it the biggest power shift in British history, and when you see what really happened, you'll understand why no one can stop talking about it. The morning of the Westminster Abbey service arrived with all the weight of tradition that the British monarchy carries so carefully. It was early 2025, and the palace had spent months preparing what they called a blessing service, though anyone paying close attention understood it meant something more. The event was scheduled during a period when questions about King Charles's health had been circulating steadily since his coronation in May 2023. The palace needed to show strength, continuity, and preparation for whatever might come next. Westminster Abbey itself provided the perfect backdrop. The building has stood for centuries, hosting coronations, royal weddings, and state funerals. Light filtered through the stained glass windows that morning, casting colours across the stone floors that had been worn smooth by generations of footsteps. Everything about the location spoke to permanence, to an institution that had weathered countless storms and would continue doing so. The service was designed to communicate exactly that message without anyone having to say it directly. Prince William arrived looking composed in a way that felt different from his earlier public appearances. The restlessness that sometimes showed in his younger years had been replaced by something more controlled, more deliberate. He had been shaped by years of watching his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, manage the weight of the crown with discipline and patience. He had learned from his father's long wait for the throne. Now at this service, he carried himself like someone who understood exactly what was expected of him and was ready to deliver it. Catherine stood beside him, and her presence commanded attention in its own right. She had faced significant health challenges in 2024, and her return to public life had been watched closely by the media and the public. But rather than appearing diminished by what she had been through, she seemed strengthened by it. There was a quiet authority in how she moved, in how she held herself. She was no longer just the woman who had married into the royal family. She had become someone who understood the institution from the inside and knew how to navigate it effectively. The guest list for the service included senior members of the royal family, government officials, and representatives from various Commonwealth nations. Everyone had their assigned seats, their designated roles in the ceremony. The order of service had been planned down to the minute, with every entrance, every prayer, every hymn carefully choreographed. Royal events operate on precision. They have to. The symbolism matters too much to leave anything to chance. As people settled into their seats and the ceremonial music began, there was an expectation in the air. This was supposed to be a demonstration of unity, a reminder that despite whatever speculation existed about the king's health or the monarchy's future, the institution remained solid. The camera positions had been agreed upon weeks in advance. The media knew what images they were expected to capture. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Except it wasn't. Not entirely. Queen Camilla was scheduled to enter alongside King Charles. Her presence was meant to reinforce the image of partnership, of a king and queen consort standing together. But as the moment for their entrance approached, something was off. The timing felt wrong. People began to notice that Camilla was not where she was supposed to be. For an institution that operates on such rigid protocol, this kind of deviation stands out immediately. The empty space beside the king was subtle at first. Most of the public watching later broadcasts might not have registered it as significant. But for those inside the Abbey, for the royal insiders and palace staff who understood how these events were supposed to unfold, the absence created a tension that spread through the ancient building like a chill. Camilla's path to becoming queen consort had not been easy. Her relationship with Charles had been controversial for decades, marked by the painful breakdown of his marriage to Princess Diana and the public's long resistance to accepting her in any royal role. After Queen Elizabeth II died in 2022, Camilla had worked to establish herself more firmly within the royal structure. She had tried to define her role on her own terms rather than simply fading into the background as some had expected or hoped she might. Her relationship with William had always carried complications. He had witnessed firsthand how his mother suffered during the breakdown of his parents' marriage. Those memories did not simply disappear because time passed or because Camilla eventually married his father. There was history there, unresolved feelings, tensions that occasionally surfaced despite everyone's best efforts to present a united front. William noticed her absence immediately. His reaction was controlled, as it always had to be at public events, but those watching him closely could see the slight adjustment in his posture, the way his expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Catherine responded instinctively, shifting slightly to help maintain the visual balance that the cameras required. She understood without needing to be told that something had gone wrong with the carefully planned choreography of the day. The service continued, but the atmosphere had changed. The ceremonial music still played. The clergy moved through their appointed roles, yet there was an awareness now, a sense that the script had been disrupted. In an institution built entirely on tradition and predictability, even small deviations carry meaning. They suggest cracks in the foundation, questions about who actually holds power, and how decisions get made behind the palace walls. When Camilla finally appeared, it was not through the entrance that had been designated for her. The great wooden doors at the far end of the abbey swung open with more force than ceremony typically allows. She moved quickly, her footsteps echoing across the stone floor in a way that drew attention rather than blending into the solemn atmosphere. This was not the subtle, dignified entrance of someone taking their pre-assigned place in a ritual. This was something else entirely. She crossed the central aisle, moving past the invisible, boundaries that protocol had established. Royal events operate on carefully maintained spatial relationships. Who stands where, who enters when, who occupies which position relative to the sovereign. All of this carries meaning. By moving as she did, Camilla was not just late or flustered. She was disrupting the entire symbolic structure of the event. Faces throughout the abbey registered the breach. The clergy, who had rehearsed their roles many times, hesitated. They were trained to maintain composure no matter what happened, but this situation fell outside the normal range of minor disruptions they might have anticipated. No one seemed certain whether to intervene, to redirect, or to simply allow the moment to pass and hope the service could recover its rhythm. The tension became palpable. This was no longer just a blessing service meant to reassure the public about the monarchy's stability. It had become something more complicated, more revealing. The cameras captured expressions that palace communications teams would later struggle to manage. The careful image of unity that the event was designed to project had fractured, and everyone present understood that the implications would extend far beyond this single morning in Westminster Abbey. The disruption hung in the air of Westminster Abbey like something tangible, something that could not simply be waved away or ignored. The atmosphere had shifted from a solemn ceremony to something far more uncertain. Those seated in the pews who understood royal protocol recognized immediately that what they were witnessing fell completely outside the boundaries of acceptable behavior at such an event. The clergy stood frozen, caught between their rehearsed roles and a situation for which no rehearsal had prepared them. Camilla's movement across the central aisle had violated more than just spatial arrangements. She had broken through the invisible barriers that separate different levels of royal hierarchy during ceremonial occasions. The route that had been prepared for her, the carefully designated entrance that would have allowed her to take her place without disrupting the flow of the service, had been abandoned entirely. Instead, she had chosen a path that brought her directly into the visual and symbolic space that had been reserved for Prince William and Catherine. The sound of her heels against the marble floor continued to echo through the abbey. It was too loud, too insistent, cutting through what should have been a moment of quiet reverence. The choir, which had been singing, seemed to lose their rhythm slightly. The musical director maintained the tempo, but something in the harmony had faltered. Even trained professionals struggle to maintain perfect performance when the environment around them shifts unexpectedly. William remained standing in his designated position, his posture absolutely straight. Years of public appearances had taught him how to control his physical reactions, how to maintain the appearance of calm regardless of what might be happening internally. But the discipline required to stand completely still in that moment was visible in the tension of his shoulders, in the tightness of his jaw. He was a man holding himself together through sheer force of will. Catherine stood beside him, and her awareness of the situation was evident in how carefully she monitored everything happening around them. She could sense the shift in William's breathing, the subtle adjustment in his stance as Camilla drew closer. When Camilla moved in a way that threatened to block the camera angles that had been established for capturing William and Catherine during key moments of the service, Catherine's response was minimal but effective. A single glance, brief and precise, communicated more than words could have. It was a look that established boundaries without creating a scene. What happened next disturbed even those observers who had witnessed decades of royal events, as the Archbishop prepared to begin the invocation, a crucial moment in the blessing service. Camilla reached toward the sacred objects that had been arranged near the altar. These items were not merely decorative, they carried symbolic weight, and the protocols surrounding who could touch them and when were deeply established. Only the sovereign and his direct heir were permitted to interact with these objects during the ceremony. Camilla spoke to the clergy members standing nearby. Her words were too quiet for most people in the abbey to hear, and the cameras could not pick up what she said. But the effect of whatever she communicated was immediate and unmistakable. The clergy members exchanged glances. One of them moved as if to redirect her, then stopped, apparently uncertain about how to handle the situation without creating an even larger disruption. The rhythm of the service, which had been moving forward with the measured pace of centuries of tradition, simply stopped. The Archbishop, who had been about to speak the words of invocation that would officially begin the blessing portion of the ceremony, paused. Silence fell across Westminster Abbey. It was not the contemplative silence of prayer or the respectful silence of reverence. It was the uncomfortable silence of a ceremony that had lost its way, where no one present knew quite how to proceed. King Charles had been observing everything from his position. His expression remained carefully neutral, but those who knew him well could see the calculation happening behind that neutral facade. He had waited his entire life to become king. He had endured decades of criticism, speculation about whether he would ever take the throne, questions about whether he should abdicate in favor of his son. Now finally wearing the crown, he was watching a moment that was supposed to demonstrate stability, instead reveal fractures within his own family structure. The king had learned discipline from his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. She had ruled for 70 years through countless crises, always maintaining her composure, always putting the institution ahead of personal feelings. Charles had absorbed those lessons even as he sometimes struggled to apply them in his own life. But in this moment at Westminster Abbey, watching his wife disrupt a ceremony that carried such symbolic importance, he drew on everything his mother had taught him about duty and control. The silence stretched. Outside the Abbey, London continued its daily rhythm, unaware of what was unfolding inside. Traffic moved through the streets. Tourists took photographs. Life proceeded normally. But inside those ancient stone walls, time seemed to have stopped. The stained glass windows continued to cast coloured light across the floor, but the beauty of the setting could not disguise the tension that had settled over everyone present. When movement finally resumed, it came not from the clergy, but from King Charles himself. He stepped forward, not hurriedly, but with clear purpose. Each footstep against the stone floor carried intention. He was not rushing to fix a problem, he was asserting control over a situation that threatened to spiral beyond acceptable boundaries. The clergy, still uncertain about how to proceed, turned toward him instinctively. He was the sovereign. In moments of confusion, the institution defaults to royal authority. The king's approach toward the altar area where the sacred objects rested was measured and deliberate. He did not look at Camilla directly, though she stood nearby. His focus remained on the elements of the ceremony itself, on restoring the order that had been disrupted. In his movement, in his bearing, there was a message being communicated, not just to those present in the Abbey, but to the broader institution of the monarchy. This was his reign. These decisions were his to make, and he would not allow personal complications to undermine the stability that the crown required, though. symbolic crown that rested among the sacred objects was not the heavy, jewel-encrusted St. Edward's crown that had been placed on his head during his coronation. This was a smaller piece used specifically in blessing services to represent the continuity of the royal line and the sacred nature of the monarch's role. When Charles reached for it, he did so with both hands, lifting it carefully but firmly. The gesture carried weight far beyond the physical object itself. What the king did next would be discussed and analysed for months afterward. Rather than returning the crown to its place among the sacred objects, rather than attempting to simply restore the ceremony to its planned course, he turned. His movement was slow, almost ritualistic in its precision, and the direction he turned placed him facing not the assembled congregation, not the clergy, not his wife who stood nearby, having caused the disruption. He turned to face his son and daughter-in-law. The light coming through the stained glass windows seemed to intensify in that moment. Though perhaps it was simply that every eye in the abbey had focused on the same scene. Charles stood holding the symbolic crown, facing William and Catherine. The three of them formed a tableau that the cameras captured from multiple angles. No words were spoken. The Archbishop had not yet resumed the invocation. The choir remained silent. Everything depended on what would happen next, and everyone present understood that they were witnessing something that would reshape the monarchy's immediate future. The royal convoy made its way back through London's streets after the Westminster Abbey service ended. Crowds had gathered along the route, as they always did for royal events, waving flags and taking photographs, most of them unaware of the tension that had unfolded inside the ancient building. The palace gates closed behind the vehicles, sealing the royal family away from public view. But what had happened at the Abbey could not simply be left behind in those stone halls. It followed them back to Buckingham Palace, carried in the silence between family members, in the carefully controlled expressions that would not relax until they were truly alone. King Charles did not linger in the public areas of the palace. He moved directly to his private office, a space where the weight of ceremony could be set aside and difficult decisions could be made without the eyes of staff or media watching every movement. The transition from public figure to private individual happened quickly for Charles. The robes and formal attire were removed. What remained was a man facing a situation that required immediate attention and clear judgment. Camilla entered the office shortly after him. She still carried some of the urgency that had marked her actions at the Abbey, still seemed to believe that explanation or justification might smooth over what had occurred. But the atmosphere between them had changed fundamentally. The familiar comfort that typically existed in their private moments together had vanished entirely. In its place was something colder, more formal, more final. Charles did not raise his voice. Those who knew him understood that his anger rarely expressed itself through volume. Instead, he became precise, almost surgical in how he addressed problems. He saw the incident at Westminster Abbey not as a personal embarrassment, though it certainly was that, but as a threat to the monarchy itself at a moment when strength and unity were essential. The questions about his health that had circulated since his coronation made this particular ceremony crucial. It was meant to demonstrate that the crown was secure, that succession was clear, that the institution would continue smoothly, regardless of what challenges might arise. Instead, the service had revealed fractures that the media would certainly exploit. The king had spent decades watching his mother manage the monarchy with careful discipline. Queen Elizabeth II had understood that personal desires and institutional needs did not always align, and when they conflicted, the institution had to come first. She had demonstrated this principle countless times throughout her 70-year reign. Charles had absorbed those lessons even during periods when his own choices seemed to contradict them. But now, wearing the crown himself, he understood with absolute clarity what his mother had known. The monarchy was larger than any individual within it, and protecting it sometimes required painful decisions. He reached for the schedules that had been prepared months in advance. The royal calendar extended far into the future, with every significant event carefully planned and coordinated. Trooping the Colour, the annual military parade celebrating the monarch's official birthday, state visits to Commonwealth nations, diplomatic receptions at the palace, garden parties, charitable events. Each one represented an opportunity to strengthen the monarchy's public image and connection with the British people. Each one had assigned roles for senior members of the royal family. Charles began making changes. his decisions were methodical and deliberate. Camilla's name appeared frequently on the existing schedules, reflecting her role as Queen Consort. But as Charles worked through the documents, many of those appearances were modified. Balcony appearances during major celebrations were limited to the most essential occasions. State receptions were adjusted so that her presence became optional rather than expected. Overseas tours that had included her were reconsidered and in several cases reassigned. The instructions moved quickly through the palace's administrative structure. Private secretaries received updated directives. Senior aides began the process of revising official schedules. The changes were significant enough that staff members who had worked in the palace for years recognized them as unusual, as a clear signal that something fundamental had shifted in the internal power dynamics of the royal family. By the end of that afternoon, Camilla's public role had been drastically reduced. Her title remained unchanged. She was still Queen Consort, but the influence and visibility that typically accompanied that position had been sharply curtailed. It was not a public dismissal. Charles understood that an obvious removal would create its own problems, would generate headlines and speculation that could damage the monarchy as much as the original incident. Instead, what he implemented was something more controlled, a gradual but unmistakable distancing that would send clear messages within palace circles while maintaining a veneer of normalcy for public consumption. The effect was perhaps colder than an outright confrontation would have been. It was an erasure of relevance, a systematic removal from the spaces where power and influence actually operated. Elsewhere in Buckingham Palace, Prince William and Catherine were summoned to meet with the king. The conversation that followed marked a clear turning point in their roles within the royal structure. Charles did not frame it as a request or a suggestion. The tone he used made clear that he was assigning responsibility, not seeking volunteers. The Prince and Princess of Wales were no longer simply preparing for future duties. They were being moved into active leadership immediately. William listened carefully as his father outlined the new expectations. He would now coordinate key royal appearances and oversee public messaging strategies. Decisions about how the monarchy presented itself to the media and the public would increasingly flow through him. This went far beyond the ceremonial functions he had been performing. It was operational authority over core aspects of how the institution functioned. Catherine's role expanded similarly. She would be central to shaping the monarchy's public image, working directly with communications, teams, and strategic advisors. The shift was not entirely unexpected. William had been preparing for increased responsibility for years, but the speed of the transition, the immediate transfer of real power rather than gradual delegation, reflected the urgency Charles felt about stabilizing the monarchy after the Westminster Abbey incident. The future was being brought forward, not because the king intended to step aside, but because he recognized that the institution needed a clear and visible center of gravity beyond himself alone. By evening, the palace had transformed into a different kind of workplace. Staff members who had operated under established routines for years found themselves adapting to new procedures and new chains of command. Documents that previously required multiple levels of approval before reaching senior royals were now being expedited directly to William's office. Security briefings that had gone to the king first were now shared simultaneously with the Prince of Wales. Media strategy sessions included Catherine as a primary voice rather than a supporting participant. The changes rippled through every department. The household staff, the communications team, the private secretaries who managed schedules and coordinated events, all of them adjusted to a new reality where William and Catherine held substantially more authority than they had possessed just days earlier. Some staff members adapted smoothly, having anticipated this transition for years. Others struggled with the speed of the change, uncertain about how to navigate the new power structure. Throughout all of this, the palace maintained its characteristic discretion. No official announcements were made about internal restructuring. No press releases explained the redistribution of responsibilities. The monarchy has always operated on the principle that some things are better demonstrated through action than explained through words. The British public would see the changes gradually, through the pattern of who appeared at which events, who spoke on behalf of the royal family, who stood where during ceremonial occasions. Understanding would come through observation rather than declaration. What had begun at Westminster Abbey with a moment of disruption had catalysed a rapid and comprehensive reorganisation of power within the British monarchy. King Charles had responded not with hesitation or delay, but with decisive action rooted in his understanding of what the institution required. The Crown's stability depended on clear lines of authority and public confidence in its future. By the time that long day finally ended, those lines had been redrawn completely. The transformation that swept through the royal household in the weeks and months following the Westminster Abbey service was thorough and unmistakable to those paying attention. It happened without fanfare or formal announcements, unfolding through a series of small but significant changes that accumulated into something much larger. Offices were reorganized, staff assignments shifted. Advisors who had long been associated with certain members of the royal family found themselves reassigned or replaced entirely. The palace, which had operated according to established patterns for years, began moving to a different rhythm. The changes were most visible in the teams surrounding different royal households. Individuals who had gravitated toward Queen Camilla's circle, who had built their careers on proximity to her influence, discovered that their positions were being reconsidered. Some were moved to less prominent roles. Others left the royal household altogether, taking positions outside the palace system. In their places came younger staff members, people whose careers and loyalties were aligned more closely with Prince William and Catherine rather than with the older generation. These personnel shifts might have seemed like ordinary administrative adjustments to outside observers, but within palace walls they carried unmistakable meaning. Power in any institution flows through relationships and access. When the people who control schedules change, when the advisors who shape decisions are replaced, when the channels through which information flows are redirected, the fundamental operations of that institution transform. The monarchy was experiencing exactly this kind of transformation, quietly but completely. William's daily routine changed significantly as his responsibilities expanded. He had always maintained a structured schedule, balancing royal duties with family life and personal interests. But by mid-2024, his working hours extended considerably. Morning briefings that once covered upcoming events and ceremonial obligations now included detailed security assessments, diplomatic updates, and media forecasts. He was receiving information that went far beyond what a future heir typically accessed. He was operating as someone who needed comprehensive understanding of current situations in order to make immediate decisions. The prince approached these new responsibilities with the kind of focused discipline that had been cultivated in him since childhood. Meetings became more efficient under his direction. Decisions that might previously have taken days or weeks of consultation were made more quickly. William demonstrated little patience for bureaucratic delays or unnecessary layers of approval. Those working with him noticed the shift immediately. This was not someone preparing for eventual authority. This was someone exercising authority right now. Catherine's evolution during this same period was equally significant, though it manifested differently. She had always been popular with the public, admired for her style and her dedication to charitable causes, but her role expanded well beyond ceremonial appearances and patronage of worthy organizations. She became actively involved in strategic planning sessions about how the monarchy should present itself to a changing Britain and a skeptical younger generation. Her input shaped communication strategies and influenced decisions about which issues the royal family would address publicly. Her approach brought something the monarchy had been lacking. She combined genuine warmth with strategic thinking, an ability to connect with ordinary people while maintaining the dignity and distance that royal protocol required. After her health challenges in 2024, her return to public life carried added weight. She was seen as someone who had faced real difficulties and emerged stronger, more determined, more focused on making her role meaningful. Public polling reflected this perception. Approval ratings for the Prince and Princess of Wales reached levels the monarchy had not seen in years. The contrast with what was happening at Clarence House could not have been starker. Camilla's world contracted steadily throughout 2024. The calendar that had once been filled with engagements, appearances, and ceremonial duties became noticeably sparse. Events that she would have automatically attended in previous years proceeded without her. State occasions that called for the presence of senior royals somehow managed with other family members filling those roles. Invitations that had once arrived regularly became rare or stopped coming altogether. Her absence from major events became a pattern that media observers began to notice and comment on. Royal correspondents who covered the monarchy closely started writing about the shift, though most did so carefully, avoiding direct statements about internal family dynamics in favour of noting objective facts about attendance and visibility. But the pattern was clear enough that even casual followers of royal news could not miss it. The Queen Consort was fading from public view. For someone who had fought for decades to establish her place within the royal family, who had endured enormous public hostility before gradually winning a measure of acceptance, this retreat represented more than a scheduling adjustment. It was a fundamental loss of position and influence. The confidence that had characterized her early years as Queen Consort, the sense that she had finally secured her place and could shape her role according to her own vision, evaporated. What replaced it was isolation and an increasingly clear understanding that the power center of the monarchy had moved decisively away from her. King Charles navigated this period with a steadiness that surprised many observers. There had been concerns, particularly in the early years after Queen Elizabeth's death, about whether he could effectively manage the monarchy. His long wait for the throne, his controversies, his sometimes difficult relationship with the media and public opinion. All of these factors raised questions about his ability to lead. But his response to the Westminster Abbey incident and its aftermath demonstrated a capacity for difficult decisions that some had doubted he possessed. He made a choice that many monarchs throughout history have struggled with, the choice to prioritize institutional stability over personal loyalty. His marriage to Camilla had been the defining relationship of his adult life. He had sacrificed enormously for it, enduring criticism and damage to his own reputation. But when faced with a situation that threatened the monarchy's future, he placed the institution first. The decision to systematically reduce Camilla's role and elevate William and Catherine instead could not have been easy, but Charles implemented it with determination. The king's focus shifted increasingly toward ensuring a smooth and secure transition whenever it might become necessary. His health, while improved from the concerns that had circulated in early 2023, remained a consideration. He was 75 years old, an age when any health issues carry greater weight. Rather than pretending these realities did not exist, Charles chose to prepare actively for them. By strengthening William's position, by giving his son genuine authority and experience in managing royal affairs, he was building a foundation that would allow the monarchy to continue without disruption when the time came. Public reaction to these changes developed gradually. Britain's relationship with its monarchy has always been complex, a mixture of tradition, pride, skepticism, and practical questions about relevance and value. The drama at Westminster Abbey had sparked conversation about dysfunction within the royal family. But as William and Catherine became more visible and more central to royal operations, public sentiment began to shift. Opinion polls conducted throughout late 2024 and into 2025 showed increasing confidence in the monarchy's direction. Media coverage reflected and reinforced this trend. Rather than focusing on internal conflicts and questions about the king's health, stories began emphasizing the effective partnership between Charles and his son. Commentary pieces described a monarchy that had found its footing after years of uncertainty following Queen Elizabeth's death. The narrative changed from one of institutional crisis to one of successful adaptation and renewal. William and Catherine were increasingly portrayed not as future leaders, but as present ones, already carrying much of the monarchy's weight. The transformation became visible in how royal events were staged and covered. Seating arrangements at ceremonial occasions placed William and Catherine in positions of prominence. Speaking orders at public events gave them priority. When foreign dignitaries visited Britain, they spent substantial time with the Prince and Princess of Wales, not just with the King. The visual language of monarchy, so carefully managed and so rich with symbolic meaning, communicated clearly that power had been redistributed. By the time spring arrived in 2025, a full year after the Westminster Abbey service, the monarchy operated according to a fundamentally different structure than it had before that ceremony. King Charles remained the sovereign, the constitutional head of state, the person in whom legal authority resided. But the practical operations of the monarchy, its public face, its strategic direction, and its connection with the British people increasingly ran through William and Catherine. They had not claimed this position through any dramatic confrontation or public declaration. It had been granted to them by the king himself, a deliberate transfer of authority designed to protect the institution he served. The shift represented more than just a redistribution of responsibilities among family members. It reflected a recognition that the monarchy's survival depends on its ability to adapt while maintaining continuity. The crown had to be both ancient and modern, both traditional and relevant. In William and Catherine, the institution found figures who could embody that balance. They represented the future while respecting the past, brought fresh energy while honouring established protocols, and connected with contemporary Britain while preserving the dignity and mystique that give monarchy its power. What began as a moment of disruption in Westminster Abbey had catalysed a comprehensive transformation. The monarchy emerged from that period not weakened, but restructured, with a clearer sense of direction and a visible path forward. The crown had quietly changed hands in every way except the purely legal one, and everyone involved understood that when the final, formal transition eventually occurred, it would feel less like a dramatic change and more like the recognition of a reality that had already been established.